My wife, Emily, had an affair with her gym trainer, Mike. She demanded half of everything in our divorce, but what she did not know was that my dad secretly owned our house and savings. I never thought I would be sharing this story, but here I am. My name is Jack. I am a 35-year-old accountant, and I have been working at a small firm in town for almost a decade. I have always been the type to stay level-headed, even during tough times, and I guess that is why I have been able to keep my cool through all of this. Emily and I had been together for about 5 years, married for 2. She was 33 years old and, looking back now, I think we were lucky not to have kids. Emily had not worked since we got married. Before tying the knot, she had been in marketing, but after the wedding, she said she wanted to take a break and focus on us. I was fine with it because I made enough to support both of us and figured her break would not last long. We had a nice home and a decent amount in savings, not extravagant, but enough to be comfortable. For the first year or so, things seemed fine, but then Emily's behavior started to change. I could not pinpoint exactly when it began, but I noticed she was acting distant. She would stay out longer when she went to the gym or hung out with her friends. She stopped being affectionate and would get defensive if I asked what was wrong. At first, I told myself it was probably stress or a rough patch in our marriage, but as the weeks went on, I could not shake the feeling that something was not right. And it turned out, I was right. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. Out of reflex, I glanced at the screen. It was a message from someone named Mike. The text read, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow, babe." I froze for a moment, then opened the conversation. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Emily had been seeing her trainer, Mike, for months. The messages were explicit, filled with details about their plans for the future, plans that clearly did not include me. I just sat there, staring at her phone. I could not believe the person I married, the one I trusted the most, could betray me like this. Oddly enough, I did not feel the anger I expected. Instead, I felt numb. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was just my practical side kicking in, but I knew I had to stay calm. When she came out of the bathroom, I handed her the phone and asked her to explain. At first, she tried to laugh it off, saying it was nothing more than a joke. But when I read some of the messages aloud, her face changed. She knew there was no point in lying. She looked at me and, without an ounce of remorse, said, "I want a divorce." No apology, no guilt, just a cold, detached statement. She admitted she had been seeing Mike for a while and that she was unhappy in our marriage. Then, as if that was not enough, she immediately started talking about splitting assets. She wanted half of everything, the house, the savings, everything we had built together. She even had the audacity to say she deserved it because she had sacrificed her career to support mine. I could not believe what I was hearing, but I stayed calm. Deep down, I knew something she did not. I agreed to the divorce and told her she could have half of what I owned. She looked surprised, probably expecting a fight or some kind of breakdown, but I was not about to give her that satisfaction. Here is what Emily did not know. Almost everything we had, our house, our savings, was in my dad's name. Years ago, when I started making good money, my dad suggested I put my major assets under his name as a safety measure. He explained it would protect me in case of debts, lawsuits, or, as it turns out, a cheating wife. At the time, I thought it was just smart financial planning. So, when Emily demanded half of everything, I knew she would not be walking away with much. On paper, all I had was a modest checking account, my car, and a few personal items. The house? Technically, it was my dad's. The savings? Also under his control. Rather than get into a drawn-out legal battle, I suggested we try mediation. I figured it would save us both time and money. Emily agreed, probably thinking she would still walk away with a significant share of what she thought I had. Little did she know, my dad's plan had been in place for years. Now, here I am, pouring my story out on this forum because, truthfully, I am second-guessing how I have handled everything. So, what do you think? Am I wrong for agreeing to give her half of what was technically mine, even though I knew she would end up with way less than she expected? Update 1. Things escalated quickly once the asset disclosure came into play. My wife, Rachel, was furious. She looked completely blindsided. Rachel had convinced herself that I must have been hiding money somewhere. She shouted accusations at me, called me a liar, and even threw in a few choice words for good measure. Her lawyer? A smug-looking guy named Nathan, who clearly thought this case was a slam dunk. The moment he saw how modest my declared assets were, his grin faded faster than a cheap suit in the rain. Rachel immediately demanded answers. Where is all the money? What about the house? The savings? The investments? She just could not accept the truth that there was nothing substantial for her to claim. In no time, Nathan brought in a forensic accountant to dig into my finances. He was convinced I had stashed money in hidden accounts. At first, I will admit, the idea of someone combing through everything made me uneasy, not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew this would drag the process out. But after going over everything with my lawyer, I felt confident. My records were spotless. Legally, every dollar I claimed was exactly where I said it was. There was no trail to follow back to the assets in my father's name. As the investigation dragged on, I saw Rachel's frustration growing. Rachel had always been the type to get what she wanted, but this time, there was nothing for her to take. She just could not wrap her head around the fact that she was walking away with almost nothing. Her next play? Rachel tried to make it seem like she was some kind of unsung hero in my life. She claimed that she had made huge sacrifices to support my career and our lifestyle. According to her, staying home and managing the household was the reason I had any success at all. Now, I will admit, it was sometimes helpful not having to worry about the little things around the house. But let us be real here, I am a mid-level accountant. I am not exactly pulling CEO moves or managing $1 billion portfolio. There was no sudden climb in my income or lavish lifestyle for her to take credit for. But she tried, claiming she gave up her marketing career to support me. The truth? Rachel had not worked much before we got married, and her choice to stay home was entirely her own. It was not something I ever asked of her. Nathan hammered this point during our sessions, trying to frame me as someone who had built a career on the back of her so-called sacrifices. But the truth was simple, her claims just did not hold water. Things got even messier when Rachel and her lawyer tried to drag my parents into the fight. They started making allegations that my mom and dad had been sneaking money to me or helping me hide assets. That one really lit a fire under me. My parents had nothing to do with this, and dragging them into it was a cheap, low-blow tactic. Thankfully, my lawyer handled it quickly, shutting that nonsense down in no time. Still, it was a sign of just how desperate Rachel was becoming. Smear campaign. When the financial angles did not work, Rachel shifted gears. If she could not win in court, she would try to ruin my name. She started spreading rumors within our circle of friends. According to her, I was this heartless man who had left her penniless after lying about our finances. The stories she spun were outrageous. I would hear from mutual friends that Rachel was telling everyone I had hidden money, lied to her for years, and manipulated her into thinking we had more than we did. She even took her campaign to social media, writing posts about selfish partners and betrayal. Of course, she never used my name directly, but it was painfully obvious who she was talking about. Some people believed her. There are always folks who will take the side of the person who seems to have been wronged. But most of our mutual friends knew better. They saw through the theatrics and recognized it for what it was, a desperate attempt to salvage her pride. It was frustrating to watch her try to paint me as the bad guy, but I reminded myself that the people who mattered knew the truth. I refused to let her antics distract me from the real priority, making sure she did not take more than what she deserved. Staying ready. While Rachel focused on tearing me down, I stayed laser-focused on preparation. My lawyer and I worked like a well-oiled machine, gathering evidence and keeping everything above board. I documented every interaction I had with Rachel, every baseless demand she made, and every attempt she made to twist the narrative. If this thing went to court, I wanted to be ready for anything. I also made sure to collect proof of her affair with Mike. Adultery does not always play a big role in divorce cases, but I wanted to show the court that Rachel was far from the victim she claimed to be. I had everything: text messages, photos of them together, and even statements from people who had known about the affair but stayed quiet. It was not about humiliating her, it was about ensuring the truth came out. Mike's change of heart. What made this even more absurd was watching Mike's reaction to the whole ordeal. When Rachel told him she wanted to leave me and start a life with him, he seemed thrilled. They had this little fantasy of running off into the sunset together. But as soon as the divorce got complicated, Mike started pulling back. From what I heard, the idea of taking on Rachel's baggage, emotional and financial, was not as appealing as he thought. Their fairy tale was starting to crack, and it became clear that Mike was not willing to deal with the mess Rachel had created. It turns out Scott was not as into Amanda as she thought he was. From what I heard through the grapevine, he started backing off the moment he realized being with her meant dealing with her financial mess. Amanda, meanwhile, had built this fantasy in her head of a grand, shiny future with Scott, but reality hit her like a freight train. To make matters worse for Scott, word started spreading about his involvement with Amanda. Clients at the gym began avoiding him. It turns out that people are not keen on working with a trainer who is known for messing around with married women. His reputation took a nosedive, and suddenly Scott was scrambling to keep his distance from Amanda. Amanda, on the other hand, was starting to realize her fairy tale was just a pipe dream. I might have felt bad for her if it were not for everything she put me through. But as far as I am concerned, this is the bed she made, and now she has to lie in it. Mixed emotions. As for me, it is a strange mix of feelings. On one hand, I feel like I got the justice I deserved. I am relieved that I took the necessary precautions to protect myself, and I am glad Amanda is not walking away with the windfall she was counting on. But at the same time, it is hard not to feel a twinge of sadness. This was not just some relationship, it was my marriage. I loved Amanda once, and I believed in the life we were building together. Watching it all unravel has been rough, even though I know it is for the best in the long run. Update 2. Things have taken a wild turn since my last update. Amanda's desperation is starting to show in ways I never expected. She has realized that her dreams of a big payout are not going to happen, and now she is determined to make my life a living nightmare. Her latest tactic? Threatening to ruin my career and destroy my reputation. She outright told me that if I did not play fair and give her more money, she would spread lies about me at work and tarnish my name. At first, I did not take her seriously. But then she started showing up at my office, completely unannounced. The first time, she came in calm, pretending like she just wanted to talk things through. But when I made it clear there was nothing left to discuss, she flipped a switch. She started yelling in the middle of the office, shouting things like, "Everyone here is going to know what kind of person you really are." Thankfully, I managed to get her out before things escalated further, but it is becoming clear that Amanda is growing more and more unpredictable. Her family situation. Amanda's personal life is not faring much better. After coming to terms with the fact that she was not going to get a dime out of me, she moved back in with her parents. From what I have been told, things there are not exactly sunshine and rainbows. Her parents have been supportive, but it is obvious they are getting tired of the chaos she brings with her. Mutual friends have said Amanda has been fighting with her family constantly, lashing out and playing the victim card to anyone who will listen. She seems like she is on the verge of a meltdown, and honestly, I am not surprised. Legal battles. On the legal front, things are getting messier by the day. Amanda's lawyer is doing everything in his power to dig up dirt on me. He filed motions to get access to my parents' financial records, even though my lawyer has made it clear that their assets are not part of this case. It is an obvious attempt to rattle me, but it is not working. They have also started trying to pull my colleagues into this mess, hoping someone at work will have dirt to share. Amanda's lawyer filed motions to depose a few co-workers, looking for any hint of under-the-table income or hidden money. It is exhausting to keep dealing with this nonsense, but they keep coming back with new requests every time we handle the previous ones. It feels like I am stuck in a never-ending game of chess. Every move I make, Amanda and her team try to counter. Thankfully, my lawyer has been incredible, and the safeguards my father put in place years ago have held strong. But I have to admit, the constant back and forth is wearing me down. I am not sure how much longer I can keep this up before we are forced to take it to court. Failed mediation attempts. We have already tried mediation twice, and both sessions were complete disasters. The first attempt lasted all of 20 minutes before Amanda stormed out. She flat out refused to compromise on her ridiculous demands for half the house and our savings. My lawyer patiently explained that the house was legally in my father's name and the savings were not nearly as substantial as she thought. Amanda refused to believe it, accusing me of lying and even going so far as to say the mediator was biased. The second attempt was even more chaotic. Amanda came in with a laundry list of absurd demands. She wanted full ownership of the house, half of all the savings, which barely exist, and years of alimony. When my lawyer calmly pointed out, once again, that she was not entitled to any of those things, Amanda completely lost her cool. She shouted about how she had sacrificed everything for me and accused me of leaving her with nothing. I sat there silently, trying to keep my composure. But inside, I was furious. Amanda was the one who cheated. Amanda was the one who wanted the divorce. And now, she is trying to paint me as the villain? It is absolutely mind-boggling. After that second mediation session, it was obvious we were headed to court. Her financial woes. Meanwhile, Amanda's finances are in shambles. She has been borrowing money from family and friends to cover her mounting legal fees, and she is running out of people to ask. She clearly did not expect this divorce to drag out the way it has, and now she is paying the price, literally. From what I hear, even her closest friends are starting to back away. They are tired of her constant complaints and fed up with her playing the victim. It is like everything she thought she would gain from this divorce is slipping through her fingers. The more Rachel spiraled, the more erratic her behavior became. Friends who had been close to her told me she spent most of her days complaining to anyone willing to listen about how I had destroyed her life. At first, people sympathized, but eventually, even her closest friends started to distance themselves. They were tired of the constant theatrics and the never-ending victim narrative she clung to like a life raft. Rachel had painted this grand picture in her head of what she would walk away with after the divorce, but piece by piece, it was all slipping out of reach. Keeping my cool. Through this entire mess, I made it my priority to stay calm and deliberate. Whenever Rachel leveled accusations or made outrageous demands, I responded with facts and evidence. Her lawyer's requests for financial documentation were met promptly because I had nothing to hide. My lawyer, Mark, has been nothing short of a rock during all this. He has made sure that every step we take is legally airtight, in stark contrast to the desperate and chaotic approach of Rachel's team. Meanwhile, I have also been doing everything possible to protect my parents from this nonsense. Rachel's repeated attempts to drag them into the drama have been infuriating, but the safeguards we put in place years ago have held strong. The fact that Rachel kept trying, though, showed just how desperate she had become. She seemed convinced there was a hidden vault of treasure she could uncover if she pushed hard enough. But no matter how hard she looked, there was nothing there. Update 3: The Courtroom Showdown. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, and let me tell you, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rachel was the first to take the stand, and she came out swinging. Her testimony was full of accusations. She insisted I had hidden assets, lied about our finances, and manipulated everything in my favor. She painted herself as a woman betrayed, claiming she had sacrificed everything for me, her career, her dreams, only to be left with nothing. She broke down in tears at one point, talking about how much she had trusted me. According to her, I had blindsided her with my financial trickery. It was a compelling performance, I will give her that. But then came the turning point when my lawyer presented the evidence of her affair with Scott. As the text messages, photos, and details of their relationship were laid out, you could feel the air shift in the courtroom. The judge, the jury, everyone could see the cracks in Rachel's story. She tried to downplay the affair, calling it a mistake and claiming it had nothing to do with the divorce. But the damage was already done. Her credibility was shattered, and it became glaringly obvious that her financial demands were less about fairness and more about trying to cash in. My side of the story. When it was my turn to testify, I stayed calm and focused on the truth. My lawyer, Mark, had prepped me well. I knew that getting emotional or defensive would only hurt my case. I explained everything in clear terms, how my father had advised me years ago to structure my finances in a way that would safeguard them, how I had been completely transparent during the divorce proceedings, and how I had tried to handle everything amicably through mediation. I also addressed Rachel's smear campaign and erratic behavior. Mark presented all the documentation I had kept, every baseless accusation, every hostile message, and every lie she had spread. Piece by piece, we dismantled her claims. When it came to the finances, we laid out the facts. The house was legally owned by my father, the savings were modest at best, and there were no secret accounts or hidden income. The judge seemed to appreciate how straightforward I was. I did not attack Rachel personally, but I also did not sugarcoat the reality of the situation. Critical testimonies. What really sealed the deal were the testimonies from a couple of key witnesses. First, my father took the stand. He explained in detail how we had set up the financial arrangements years ago, long before any of this drama began. He laid out how the house was in his name, how the investments were under his control, and how these measures were put in place as a form of long-term financial security. He made it crystal clear that these were his assets, not mine, and that Rachel had no legal claim to them. Next, one of my co-workers testified on my behalf. Rachel's legal team had tried to argue that I was hiding income, claiming I had been receiving cash under the table or undisclosed bonuses. My co-worker quickly debunked that, explaining that my salary was modest, consistent, and fully accounted for. There were no secret earnings or hidden funds, just the paycheck I had disclosed from the very beginning. These testimonies left no room for doubt. The judge could see that Rachel's accusations were baseless and that the financial arrangements she was challenging were completely legitimate. The judge's decision. After several days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally issued the verdict. When I heard the words, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. The divorce was finalized in my favor. Rachel's demands for half of the house and our savings were denied outright. The judge ruled that since the house and most of the assets were legally owned by my father, Rachel had no claim to them. She was awarded a small amount of temporary support, but it was far less than she had been asking for, and it was only granted for a short period. The judge also acknowledged Rachel's infidelity and her lack of contribution to our household finances as factors in the decision. Her attempt to portray herself as the victim had completely fallen apart.